The first sound I heard after giving birth wasn't my baby's cry. It was my husband's voice. Cold, shaking, and full of disbelief. Something is wrong. I was exhausted, barely awake. I turned my head toward him. What? He was standing beside the hospital bassinet. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at our 2 newborn daughters. Twin girls, born only 7 minutes apart. One had light skin, soft brown hair, and tiny fingers curled against her cheek. The other had noticeably darker skin. Her hair was thick and dark. She was beautiful. Perfect. But my husband's face had changed completely. He looked at the darker baby, then at me, then back at the baby. Finally, he whispered, "That's not my child." My heart stopped. "What did you just say?" He shook his head. "Our child is white." I stared at him in disbelief. "Daniel, they're both our daughters." He stepped backward. "No, Daniel, that baby isn't mine." The room suddenly felt freezing. I looked at our daughter. She was peacefully sleeping, completely unaware that her own father had just rejected her. I reached toward her tiny hand. "She's your daughter." Daniel's voice became louder. "Then explain her skin." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm not explaining my baby's skin to you." He stared at me. "You cheated on me." I felt like someone had slapped me. "No. Tell me who he is." "There is no one." He shook his head. "You expect me to believe that?" I started crying. "Daniel, she's only minutes old." "I don't care." That sentence broke something inside me. 3 days earlier, everything had been different. Daniel had held my stomach and kissed it every night. We're finally going to be a family. He had painted the nursery himself. 2 cribs, 2 little dresses, 2 names written on the wall. Lily and Maya. He had even joked, "If they look like you, I'm finished." I laughed. "Why?" "Because I'll never say no to them." He had promised. But now, he wouldn't even touch Maya. The doctor entered the room. She immediately noticed the tension. "Is everything okay?" Daniel pointed toward Maya. "I want a DNA test." The doctor looked at him. "Mr. Carter, babies can have different skin tones for many reasons." "I don't care. I want proof." I wiped my tears. "Fine. Do the test." Daniel looked surprised. "You agree?" "Yes. Because when the results come back." I looked directly into his eyes. "You'll have to apologize to your daughter." He said nothing. That evening, my mother came to the hospital. The moment she saw me crying, she rushed to my side. "What happened?" I couldn't speak. Daniel had already left. I finally whispered, "He says Maya isn't his." Mom stared at me. "What?" "He says her skin proves I cheated." My mother looked toward the bassinet, then at me. She hugged me tightly. "Don't let him make you question yourself. I know what I did. I know who I married. And I know those babies are his." Mom looked at Maya. Then she whispered, "There's something you need to know." I pulled away. "What?" She hesitated. "Your grandmother had a similar situation in our family." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Different skin tones. People assume things. But there was a genetic reason." "What reason?" She shook her head. "I'll explain later." Before she could say anything else, Daniel walked back into the room. He was holding an envelope. He threw it onto the table. I had my lawyer prepare this. I opened it. My hands started shaking. It was a paternity dispute notice. Daniel was already preparing to legally deny Maya. I looked at him. "She's 3 days old." "I know. And you're doing this?" "Until the test proves she's mine." I stared at the man I had loved for 8 years. "Daniel." He looked away. "I won't raise another man's child." I whispered, "You've already decided she's someone else's." He didn't answer. The DNA test. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. I asked Daniel to sit down. He refused. "I'll read them myself." He opened the envelope. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. His face turned completely white. I watched him. "What does it say?" He couldn't speak. I stood up. "Daniel?" He finally whispered, "She's mine." I closed my eyes. And Lily. He looked at the second page. She's mine too. I waited for him to apologize. Instead, he folded the papers. There's something wrong with the test. I stared at him. What? The laboratory made a mistake. I couldn't believe it. Daniel, you demanded the test. I don't trust it. You got exactly the answer you wanted. No. He looked at Maya, then whispered, there has to be another explanation. I picked up my daughter. Yes. There is. I walked toward the door. The explanation is that you judged your own baby because of her appearance.
He followed me.
Where are you going? Home. Our home. I turned around.
No.
My daughter's home. That night, I put both babies in their cribs. Maya opened her eyes. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. I kissed her forehead. You never have to prove that you belong. Lily began crying. I picked her up too. 2 daughters. 2 different appearances. 1 family. At least, that's what I thought. Because at 2:17 a.m., my phone received an anonymous message. The DNA test isn't the real problem. I stared at the screen. Another message appeared. Your husband already knew the result before you did. My heart began racing. Then came the final message. Ask Daniel what he did before the twins were born. I looked toward the bedroom. Daniel was asleep, or so I thought, because when I walked toward his office, I saw light underneath the door, and I heard him whispering on the phone. She can't find out about the money. I froze. Money? What money? And why had someone warned me? I quietly stepped away from the door. For the first time, I realized my husband's rejection of Maya might have had nothing to do with her skin. There was something else. Something much bigger. And whatever Daniel was hiding, he was terrified I would discover it. I stood outside Daniel's office, barefoot, holding my phone, listening to the man I had loved for 8 years whisper about money. She can't find out about the money. Those words wouldn't leave my mind. Who was he talking to? What money? And why was he so afraid I'd discover it? I quietly walked back to our bedroom. Daniel was still sitting at his desk when I returned. A few minutes later, he entered the bedroom. Why are you awake? I looked at him. Maya was crying. He nodded. Then he went to sleep. I didn't. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. For the first time since our daughters were born, I was afraid of my own husband. The next morning, Daniel left early. He kissed Lily on the forehead. Then he walked past Maya without touching her. I watched him carefully. Daniel.
He stopped.
Yes, the DNA results. What about them? You said they were wrong. He looked uncomfortable. I'll have another test done. Why? Because I don't understand how 2 babies can look so different. I stared at him. Genetics. He said nothing. Then he picked up his briefcase. I have to work. As the door closed, I noticed something on the kitchen counter. A bank envelope. Daniel's name was printed on it. I opened it. Inside was a statement from an account I'd never seen before. Balance, $480,000. My hands started shaking. Why did my husband have nearly $500,000 hidden from me? Then I saw the transaction history. Every month, $20,000 had been transferred into the account. For almost 2 years. I photographed the statement, then put it back exactly where I found it. That afternoon, my mother came over to help with the babies. I showed her the photograph. She stared at the screen. Where did you get this? Daniel's envelope. She became quiet. Mom, I don't know what that is. You're lying. She looked at me. Emma, please, tell me the truth. She sighed. There was something your father, and I never told you. My heart sank. What? Your grandmother carried a rare genetic trait. I frowned. Okay. That trait can sometimes cause siblings to have noticeably different skin tones. I looked toward Maya. So, this can happen naturally? Yes. Then Daniel has no excuse. My mother nodded. He doesn't. Then she looked back at the bank statement. But this. She pointed at the $480,000. This is different. You know something? I recognize the bank. Why? Because your father's old company used it. I froze. What company? The one Daniel works for. I called my mother's friend, Dr. Helen Carter. She was a genetic counselor. I explained everything. She told me something that changed the way I looked at my daughters. Emma, twins don't have to look identical. Even fraternal twins can inherit very different combinations of genes. So Maya's skin tone doesn't prove anything. Absolutely not. I asked, could the babies have different skin tones even if both parents are white? She paused. Yes, depending on their genetic ancestry and inherited traits. I thanked her. Then I asked one final question. Would a DNA test show whether they're siblings? Yes. And whether they're both biologically related to their father? Yes. I hung up. Daniel had no scientific excuse. He had the proof. He simply didn't want to accept it, which meant his accusation had another purpose. That evening, Daniel came home unusually late. I was feeding Maya. He walked past us, then stopped. Can we talk?
About what?
The babies. I looked at him. What about them? I want you to take another paternity test. I laughed bitterly.
Why?
I need certainty. You already have certainty. He became angry. I said I don't trust that test. I stood up. You don't trust science? I don't trust you. That hurt. But this time, I didn't cry. I simply said, fine. One more test. His expression relaxed. But this time, I pointed at him. We'll use a laboratory I choose. He hesitated, then nodded. Fine. I knew immediately. He was hiding something. Later that night, I searched through Daniel's office. I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for evidence. Inside a locked drawer, I found a folder. The label read, Project L, 17. I opened it. Inside were company documents, contracts, financial statements, and a photograph of Daniel with 3 executives. One of them was a man I recognized, Richard Blake, Daniel's boss, the company's CEO. Then I found a document titled, Life Insurance Transfer. I read it twice. The beneficiary was Daniel. The insured person was Richard Blake. I froze. Why would Daniel be the beneficiary of his boss's life insurance? Then I saw the date. The policy had been changed 6 months before my pregnancy. My heart started pounding. There was another document, a confidential company agreement. Daniel would receive $1.2 million if Richard was unable to continue as CEO. And suddenly, everything connected. The hidden $480,000. The company. The secret payments. The insurance. Daniel wasn't afraid I would discover that Maya wasn't his. He was afraid I'd discover what he had been doing at work. I quickly photographed every document. Then I heard footsteps. I closed the drawer. The office door opened. Daniel stood there.
He looked at me.
Then at the folder in my hands.
His face changed.
What are you doing? I couldn't answer.
He walked toward me.
Emma? I stepped backward. Who is Richard Blake? Silence. Then Daniel whispered, You weren't supposed to find that. My heart sank. What did you do? He didn't answer. Instead,
his phone rang.
He looked at the screen. The caller ID said, Richard Blake. Daniel answered, Hello. He listened. Then his face went completely white. What do you mean he's missing? I stared at him. Richard Blake was missing. And Daniel had just admitted it. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3:06 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was another anonymous message. You found the insurance policy. I stared at the screen. Another message arrived. Now look at the twins' hospital records. My heart stopped. Why would the hospital records matter? I opened the files I had saved. Then I noticed something strange. The birth record showed Lily 8:42 a.m. Maya 8:49 a.m. But Daniel had told everyone Maya was born first. Why would he lie about something so simple? Then I found a second hospital document, a genetic screening form, signed by Daniel. The date was 2 weeks before the twins were born. And next to his signature was a note. Confirm which child carries the inherited trait. I stared at the screen. Daniel had known about the possibility of different skin tones before our daughters were born. So his shock at Maya's appearance was a lie. He had planned something, but what? And why did he need to know which baby carried the trait? Then I noticed one final line at the bottom of the document. Do not disclose results to mother. My hands went cold. Daniel had secretly tested our unborn babies, and he had hidden the results from me. Whatever he had discovered before their birth was the real reason he rejected Maya. I stared at the hospital document. My hands were shaking. Confirm which child carries the inherited trait. And underneath it, do not disclose results to mother. I read those words again, then again. Daniel hadn't been surprised when Maya was born. He had been waiting for her to look different. That meant his accusation wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. I immediately called Dr. Helen. She answered half asleep. Emma? I found something. What? Daniel secretly had genetic testing done before the twins were born. She became silent. What kind of testing? I sent her the photograph. A few seconds later, she called back. Emma, this is serious. What does it mean? The test appears to be checking for a specific inherited trait. Could that affect skin tone? Potentially. Would it affect their health? Not necessarily. Then why would Daniel hide it?
She paused.
That's what we need to find out. The next morning, I took the document to the hospital. The nurse who had handled my pregnancy records looked nervous when she saw it. Who authorized this? She checked the system. Your husband. Why wasn't I informed? She hesitated. Because he requested confidentiality. My heart sank. Was there a result? She nodded. Yes. What did it say? She couldn't tell me immediately. Eventually, after confirming my identity, she showed me the record. There were 2 entries. Baby A, no significant finding. Baby B, inherited genetic variant detected. I stared at the screen. Baby B was Maya. I whispered. So he knew. The nurse nodded. He knew before she was born. I closed my eyes. For months, Daniel had known Maya might look different. And instead of preparing to love his daughter, he had prepared a story. A story where I was the villain. I left the hospital and called my mother. Mom. Yes. Did you know Dad's family carried a genetic trait? She went silent. Who told you? Daniel knew. My mother gasped. What? He had our babies tested before they were born. She didn't speak for several seconds. Then she said, Emma, you need to come over. When I arrived, Mom was waiting with an old wooden box. I should have shown you this years ago. She opened it. Inside were old family photographs. My grandfather, my grandmother, my father. Then, a photograph of my father's great-grandmother. She had noticeably darker skin. I stared at it. She carried the trait? Yes. Then why didn't anyone tell me? Because your father was ashamed of what people might say. I felt angry. My father wasn't ashamed of me.
No.
He was ashamed of other people's judgment. Mom nodded. He wanted you to grow up without feeling different. I looked at the photograph. And Daniel knew all of this? Apparently. Mom took out another document. It was an old family medical record. At the top was a note. Inherited pigmentation variation present in family line. I stared at it. Maya wasn't an impossibility. She wasn't proof of cheating. She was simply my daughter. And Daniel knew that. That evening, I confronted him. He was sitting at the dining table. I placed the hospital document in front of him. What is this? He looked at it. His face went pale. Where did you get that? Answer me. He stood up. Emma, you knew before Maya was born. I didn't know what it meant. You knew enough to order a secret test. I was scared. You weren't scared. I stepped closer. You were planning. He looked away. Planning what? He didn't answer. Why did you need to know which baby carried the trait? Silence. I repeated. Why? Finally, he whispered. Because of the trust. I froze. What trust? He sat down. There was money. What money? My father left me a condition. I stared at him. What condition? If I had children, only one of them could inherit. My heart started pounding. What? Daniel continued. My grandfather created a private family trust. It was worth almost $4 million. Only one biological heir could receive it. I looked at him. And you thought Maya wasn't yours? Yes. So, you thought Lily would inherit everything? He nodded. I couldn't believe it. You rejected your daughter because you thought she would cost you money. He looked ashamed. I thought you had cheated.
No.
You knew there was a genetic explanation. I didn't understand it, but you could have gotten another DNA test. I did. I froze.
What?
Daniel lowered his head. I secretly tested the babies again. Both of them. Yes. And he didn't answer. I stared at him. Tell me. He finally whispered. Both girls are mine. I laughed bitterly. So you knew? Yes. And you still rejected Maya? He closed his eyes. I was trying to protect the trust. I felt tears burning my eyes. You weren't protecting money. You were destroying your family. Then he said something that changed everything. The trust doesn't go to Lily. I froze.
What?
It doesn't go to either child. Then who gets it? He looked at me. You. I couldn't speak. Daniel continued. My grandfather changed the trust 5 years ago. The beneficiary is the mother of my first biological children. I stared at him. So, if you leave me, you get the entire trust. My heart stopped. Daniel had been hiding the truth because he wanted control over the money. He had spent months trying to convince me that Maya wasn't his, because if I became angry enough to leave him, he could claim I had abandoned the marriage and challenge the trust. He wasn't simply afraid of losing money. He was trying to manipulate me into giving up my legal rights. But there was one thing he didn't know. I had already photographed everything. The hospital records, the secret genetic test, the bank account, the insurance policy, the trust documents, and the messages. I had enough evidence to destroy his entire lie. I looked at him. You should have told me the truth. He nodded. I know. You should have trusted me. I know. And most importantly, I looked toward the nursery. You should have loved your daughter. He started crying. I know. I picked up the documents, then walked toward the door. Where are you going? I turned around. To meet your grandfather's attorney. Daniel's face changed. Emma, I smiled sadly. Because now, I'm going to find out exactly what your family has been hiding from me. The next morning, I met the attorney. He listened to everything, then opened an old file. Mrs. Carter? Yes, there is something you need to know. What? He placed a sealed envelope in front of me. This was written by Daniel's grandfather. Why are you showing me? Because the trust contains one unusual condition. I opened the envelope. The letter contained only one sentence. If my grandson ever rejects one of his children because of appearance, the entire family trust will be transferred to the children's mother. I stared at the words. Daniel's grandfather had anticipated this. And suddenly, I realized something. Daniel hadn't discovered a loophole. He had triggered the very condition he was trying to avoid. The entire $4 million trust was now legally mine. But there was more. The attorney placed another file on the table. This is about Richard Blake. I looked at him. Daniel's boss. He nodded. Richard disappeared because he discovered something about Daniel. What? The attorney opened the file. Inside was a photograph. Daniel, Richard, and a third man. The third man was someone I recognized immediately. My husband's father. The man everyone believed had died 12 years ago. But according to the photograph, he was alive. And he had been secretly working with Daniel. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. Daniel, Richard Blake, and the man standing between them. Daniel's father, Victor Carter. The man everyone had told me had died 12 years ago. I looked at the attorney. That's impossible. He calmly closed the file. Unfortunately, it isn't. Daniel's father died. That's what the family wanted everyone to believe. I felt dizzy. Why? Because Victor Carter was involved in several financial crimes. And Richard discovered the truth. I looked at the photograph again. So, Daniel knew his father was alive? The attorney nodded. Yes. How long? At least 6 years. I felt sick. For 6 years. Daniel had lied to me. I drove home. Daniel was waiting in the living room. The moment he saw my face, he knew. You found out. I placed the photograph on the table. Your father is alive. Daniel closed his eyes. Emma, don't. Please let me explain. How long? He said nothing. How long has he been alive? 6 years. I laughed bitterly. 6 years. You looked me in the eyes every day. And you let me believe your father was dead. I was protecting you. From what? From him. I stared at Daniel. Then why were you working with him? I wasn't. I pointed at the photograph. You're standing beside him. I was trying to stop him. Then why did you take his money? Daniel looked away. I knew the answer. He finally sat down. My father contacted me 6 years ago. He told me he was alive. He said he wanted to rebuild his life. Then he offered me money. How much? Enough to make me believe I could control everything. I shook my head. And Richard? Richard discovered my father was alive. So you threatened him? No. Daniel. He looked at me. I didn't hurt Richard. Then where is he? I don't know. I studied his face. For the first time, I believed him. But that didn't make him innocent. He had still lied. He had still manipulated me. And he had still rejected our daughter. Then Daniel said, my father wanted the trust. I froze. What trust? The same trust you just discovered. Victor knew about the $4 million. He wanted it. And he knew the trust would go to you, if you had children. So, he wanted you to reject Maya. Daniel nodded. He told me that if the family believed Maya wasn't mine, then the trust could be challenged.
My heart sank.
So, your father encouraged you to accuse me? Yes. And you listened. I was weak.
No.
I looked at him. You were greedy. He didn't argue. That evening, I received another message. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It was from Richard Blake. Emma, I'm alive. I stared at the screen. Another message arrived. Victor has been using Daniel. Then, your husband is not the person you should be most afraid of. My heart started pounding. I called immediately. Richard answered.
His voice was weak.
Where are you? I can't tell you. Why? Because Victor knows I'm alive. Why did you contact me? Because I have proof. Proof of what? Your husband's father planned the entire scheme. I froze.
The
pregnancy.
No.
The money. The fake paternity story. The insurance policy. Everything. I couldn't breathe. Why? Because Victor wants the trust. But why target Maya? Because Victor knew the trust had a special condition. What condition? Richard whispered. If Daniel rejects a biological child because of appearance, the trust automatically transfers to the mother. I closed my eyes. So, Victor wanted Daniel to trigger it. Exactly. But why would he do that? Because Victor believed he could force you into a settlement, then take the money from you, and disappear. I stared at the wall. This entire nightmare had been engineered. The next morning, Richard agreed to meet me. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell my mother. I only told Thomas. We met at an abandoned cafe outside the city. Richard looked exhausted. He placed a small USB drive on the table. This contains everything. I picked it up. What's on it? Bank transfers. Emails. Recordings. Everything Victor used to manipulate Daniel. Then Richard said, "There's one more thing." "What?" "Your husband's father wasn't acting alone." My stomach tightened. "Who helped him?" Richard looked at me. "Someone from your family." I felt my heart sink. "Who?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he slid a photograph across the table. I stared at it. My blood went cold. It was my mother, standing beside Victor. The photograph had been taken only 4 months ago. I looked at Richard. Why was my mother meeting him? Richard shook his head. That's what I couldn't figure out. I went home. My mother was sitting in the kitchen. I placed the photograph in front of her. She stared at it, then closed her eyes. You found him? Yes. How long have you known? For months. I couldn't believe it. You knew Victor was alive? Yes. And you met him? Yes. Why? She started crying. Because he contacted me. What did he want? Money. And what did you give him? Nothing. Then why meet him? She looked at me. Because he threatened to expose something. What? She hesitated, then whispered, Your father wasn't the only person Daniel's father had ruined. I stared at her. What does that mean, my brother? Victor destroyed his life. He stole his company, and then blamed him for the fraud. I suddenly understood. My mother had been afraid of Victor for years, but that still didn't explain why she had kept his existence secret. She finally told me the truth. My mother knew Victor was alive. Your grandmother? Yes. She spent years collecting evidence against him. And before she died, she gave everything to your father. I looked at her. That's why Grandma created the hidden records. Yes. And that's why Dad hid everything. Yes. Suddenly, the old closet made sense again. The hidden will, the recordings, the documents. They weren't just about my family. They were about Victor Carter. That night, I opened the USB Richard had given me. The first file contained financial records. The second contained emails. The third contained a video. I pressed play. Victor appeared on screen. He was speaking to Daniel. You need to make Emma believe Maya isn't yours. Daniel answered, But she is. Victor laughed. That doesn't matter. People believe what they see. Then Victor said something that made my blood run cold. Once Emma leaves, the trust will become vulnerable. The video ended. I sat in silence. Then another file appeared. Project. Family reset. Inside were names. Daniel. Victor. Margaret. My mother. And Thomas Reed. I froze. Thomas. Again. The man who had helped me from the beginning. The man who had seemed trustworthy. His name was listed as Final Contact. Before I could open the file, the front door slammed. I looked up. Daniel stood there. His face was terrified. Emma? What? You need to leave. Why? He looked toward the window. Because my father knows where you are. Then the lights suddenly went out. And from outside, we heard the sound of a car stopping. Daniel whispered, He's here. The lights went out. The house became completely silent. Then 3 slow knocks came from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel grabbed my arm. Don't move. I pulled away. Who is it? He whispered. My father. I looked toward the window. A black SUV was parked outside. 2 men were standing beside it. Then the door opened. My mother walked in. She was holding a folder. Behind her was Richard Blake. And behind Richard, police officers. I stared at them in confusion. What is happening? Richard looked at Daniel. It's over. Daniel looked terrified. Where's Victor? Richard pointed toward the street. He was arrested 10 minutes ago. I couldn't believe it.
How?
Richard smiled. Because the USB you gave me contained enough evidence to obtain a warrant. Then my mother stepped forward. Emma? She handed me the folder. This is everything. Inside were bank records, emails, secret contracts, forged documents, and recordings. There was even a recording of Victor telling Daniel exactly how to manipulate me. The final file was titled, The Plan. I pressed play. Victor's voice filled the room. Make her doubt the baby. Make her question herself. If she leaves you, we'll challenge the trust. Then Daniel's voice. What if she gets another DNA test? Victor laughed. Then make the first one look suspicious. I looked at Daniel. He lowered his head. The truth was finally undeniable. The police arrested Daniel that night. Not for rejecting his daughter, but for fraud, financial manipulation, forgery, and conspiracy. Victor faced even more serious charges. Richard provided evidence. My mother cooperated with investigators. And Margaret. She was arrested 2 days later after investigators connected her to the earlier financial scheme. For the first time, the people who had spent months controlling my life could no longer control anything. But I wasn't finished. There was still one thing I needed to do. I went to the attorney who handled the family trust. I placed all the evidence on his desk. He read through everything, then smiled. The trust condition has been triggered. What does that mean? The entire $4 million trust belongs to you. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel happy. I felt relieved. Because the money wasn't what I wanted. I wanted justice. I wanted my daughters to grow up knowing they were loved. And I wanted Maya to never hear the words, "You don't belong." 6 months later, the court officially confirmed that both girls were Daniel's biological children. The judge also ruled that the trust belonged entirely to me. Daniel lost access to the family fortune. Victor's assets were frozen. Richard returned to his position as CEO. And my mother, she moved away. She wrote me letters. I didn't answer all of them, but eventually, I answered one. I wrote, "I forgive you for being afraid, but forgiveness doesn't mean I will ever forget. My daughters deserve better than the family we came from." She never asked me to come back. For once, she respected my boundary. Daniel requested one final meeting. I almost refused, but I went. He looked broken. Not because he had lost me. Not because he had lost his money. Because he finally understood what he had done. He looked at me. "Can I see them?" I was silent. "You can see them through the proper legal process." He nodded. Then he asked, "Do they know?" "Know what? That I rejected Maya?" I looked directly into his eyes. "No." "Why not?" "Because she's too young." "And when she's older?" I answered. "When she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her the truth." His eyes filled with tears. "What will you tell her?" I stood up. That her father made a terrible mistake. And that she never had to earn her place in this family. She was born deserving love. Just like her sister. A year later, I stood in the nursery doorway. Lily and Maya were playing together. They were different, but they were sisters. One had lighter skin. The other had darker skin. Both had the same little laugh. The same curious eyes. The same habit of grabbing my necklace whenever I held them. I smiled. Maya looked at me. "Mommy." I picked her up. Lily immediately reached for me too. I held them both. And I remembered the day Daniel had said, "That baby isn't mine." Those words had nearly destroyed me. But now, they meant nothing. Because Maya knew exactly who she was. My daughter. My beautiful daughter. I eventually used part of the trust to create a foundation. Its purpose was simple. Helping mothers protect their children from financial and family manipulation. We helped women with legal support, financial education, inheritance disputes, and family betrayal. I named it the Maya Foundation because the little girl Daniel had rejected became the reason thousands of other women found their strength. One evening, I returned to the old hospital where my daughters were born. I stood outside the maternity ward, the same hallway, the same room, the same place where my life had changed. But this time, I wasn't crying. I was smiling. I remembered the fear, the accusations, the lies, the secret DNA tests, the hidden money, the betrayal, the man who had tried to make me doubt my own child. And then I realized something. I hadn't won because I got $4 million. I hadn't won because Daniel went to court. I hadn't won because Victor was arrested. I won because they failed to break me. They wanted me to believe that my daughter was a problem. Instead, she became my greatest strength. I kissed Maya's forehead that night and whispered, "You never needed to prove who you were. I knew from the moment I held you." Then I looked at Lily. "Both of you are my world." The girls smiled. And for the first time, there were no secrets, no lies, no fear. Just a mother and her 2 daughters. And the man who rejected one of them because of her appearance, he spent the rest of his life knowing that the child he refused to love was the reason his entire carefully planned empire came crashing down. And that was my revenge. Not destroying him, but building a life he could never take away from us.